All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nick from Beer and Broadband, live from Mountain Connect. Actually, not live, because by the time you see this, it won't be live. We'll be done with we're done with Mountain Connect. And it's been a long day of Beer and Broadband, but I've got some amazing guests today, and the topic today is all about sci-fi. It's going to be a broadband, but pretty much we're going to geek out on sci-fi and how that has influenced broadband technology today. So, but before I start this episode, let's do some introductions.
I'm Kate Brunk. I am a grant specialist with Learn, Design, and Apply.
Wait, and your favorite sci-fi?
Anything by Octavia Butler.
All right, okay.
I'm Megan Beresford. I think this is my
100th
100th appearance on Beer and Broadband. Maybe I just really like beer, but I'm excited for this episode about sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan.
No
I'm
way.
director of broadband programs at Learn, Design, Apply. I may have written a book, science fiction fantasy, but may have not.
Science fiction fantasy.
Sci-fi fantasy, which is a whole
different genre.
If we want to get into it, like what
deep.
the crossover is between science fiction and fantasy and where they mesh. Because I might argue that Star Wars falls more into fantasy than sci-fi.
I mean, Princess Leia and the buns. I mean, yeah, of course, fantasy.
I mean, well, anyway,
All right, so what's your favorite
okay.
sci-fi?
Favorite sci-fi, if we're talking literature, is probably Isaac Asimov books, all of them.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking movies/series, I am going to have to go with Star Wars, but only some of the Star Wars.
The old school Star Wars, right?
Old school Star Wars and some of the, new shows, like Andor and Mandalorian.
All right.
And Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm a Trekkie. All right, Bill.
I'm Bill Blackford, General Manager and CEO of Farmers Telephone and of FTI Wi-Fi, as I announced earlier today. This is interesting. The fantasy versus sci-fi. So I always think of sci-fi as like a prophetic future, right? So when you think about pure sci-fi, it basically prophesies, predicts what the future is going to look like.
Or what we should aspire to.
But Star Wars happened in the past. So it's kind of an interesting take on kind of what you said. But my favorite sci-fi, it's a movie, and it's the original Star Wars because it was the very first movie I ever went to in 1979.
Wow.
I was 3 years old.
All right.
So it has to be my favorite.
Has to be.
But I'm a big Trekkie too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm an equal opportunity Trekkie and Star Wars, huge fan of all of that, and frankly, Marvel, all those things, comic books, anything science fiction, I'm there. So, all right, well, welcome. Super excited for this. So let's first start by thinking about science fiction and all the things that have happened there. It is really a precursor to broadband, right? So what are the things, when you think about science fiction that's been in the last, how many years, what were some of the best ones that really were the precursors to using broadband technology?
So I was talking about this with Kate yesterday. AI, right? So I feel like when we think about AI,
Al. I mean, come on.
Well, and so HAL, 2001: A Space Odyssey, that is my prediction is what is going to happen with AI. I can go into why later. But
Terminator?
When we talk about, AI and, robots and, I think there's a robot here, roaming around.
I did see a robot roaming around, yeah. He had trouble talking.
Yeah. Right? But someday the technology
sometimes, so it's okay.
might get there or probably will get there. That kind of technology comes from having access to broadband. But what we think about when you're talking about kind of precursors, when I think of Isaac Asimov and his laws of robotics, right? So he has his 3 laws of robotics of how, they function, how they interact with humans, what their roles are.
What they
right?
can't do.
And so are we going to be able to have such rules, such laws with the technology, the AI that's coming that as science fiction sometimes teaches us we really need, right? There's a reason, and Octavia Butler, all of these, they talk about, predict things and the issues with them. So I think you're right with the predicting, and they show us issues. Like, people have thought about this
Long.
a long time. And so now it's like, are we, people talk about taking lessons from history. Are we taking lessons from sci-fi too?
So what predictions of sci-fi have come true today? So we've got, even think of the Jetsons, right? I mean, that's not science fiction per
That's
se,
what I was thinking.
But, I mean, it's still cartoon. I mean, like, think about that. What is actually that's pre-now that actually has come true?
Wireless communication.
Let's think about, okay, we all talked about Star
My
Trek.
Apple Watch.
Star Trek, what was the communicator? Flip the communicator, like, okay, yeah, that's true. That works, right?
Having the computer or all the information in the world in the palm of your hands, right? I mean, you think about there was cartoons, movies.
The tricorder.
Right. I mean, and I can't remember the cartoon when I was a kid, but I just remember them going up to the machine and being like, what's the answer to this? And I was like, wow, I was like in second grade thinking, okay, I have 1950s encyclopedias on my bookshelf, right? And it's like trying to get that
sold to
information.
you door to door.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So they were already probably 30 years old, right? To have that kind of information. So that alone is unbelievable as far as a predictable thing. But it's interesting because some things are predictors, but some things happened before that weren't accounted for. Think about Tesla and the things that he invented. I remember reading a story about how he remote controlled.
Wait.
I'm
sorry.
Nikola Tesla, or like which Tesla are you talking
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay,
Because
okay.
I like
Because
him, I
not-
don't like
No. Okay.
about? The original Tesla, not
The original
not
Tesla,
the company
yes.
Tesla.
He is so underrated, and I hope in this podcast,
Yeah.
people, if you take away nothing, you should take away to go learn about Nikola Tesla.
That guy, genius.
1898,
Genius.
I think
Genius.
it was, when
Yeah.
he created a remote control boat and made people think that he was controlling this boat. They were controlling it with their minds or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember how it goes, but
The ultimate jokester.
yes, definitely. Prankster. Yeah. So, I mean, some things are predictors, but he invented things that actually we thought were going to be sci-fi, but were already invented. It makes me wonder how many patents, how many amazing ideas and inventions have already been invented and have been buried by corporations. So, little conspiracy theory.
Yeah, that's.
But I don't think it's really conspiracy because it's true, right? So, anyway.
All right. So
I
what
digress.
other things have come true? What's happened now that was in sci-fi but now is reality?
I think just the ways in which we can communicate and know about what's happening around the world. Like when I've lived abroad, growing up when I was younger, I'm from a really remote rural area, and that even just thinking about other places was really new to me, or I couldn't
have the
fully
Encyclopedia
conceptualize
Britannica
it,
with
right? My grandma had the 1970s.
Right, yeah, or National
encyclopedia set,
Geographic or
the
something.
World Book set, right?
That was before the maps changed.
Right, yeah. And so when I was living abroad, just being able to communicate every day with people back home, or also having up-to-date information constantly of what's happening at a grassroots level. So like when some of the uprisings in Nigeria happened a couple years ago, like we could see it live happening from the people who were experiencing it firsthand, and it wasn't filtered through like a media company or a government. And I think that's something that has revolutionized the way we think about the world and the ways we interact and expect to be able to connect with one another.
So like the Star Wars, the rebellion. No, seriously, right? So that's the rebellion that happened. How did it transpire? How did communication
It's
happen to tell
controlling
everybody?
communication. Like if you think of all our favorite, sci-fis, and whether it's books or shows, there's always, you're evil. Not saying, well, maybe I'm saying some things are evil, but there's always someone controlling information,
Soylent
right?
Green.
And so, and so then you have technology, powered by broadband, that comes forward and is what kind of makes things clear, right? That's when we see the good guys win.
Yeah.
But I would say
Only the good guys can win with broadband.
Only the good
Yeah.
guys. I know.
Not the bad guys.
No bad guys allowed.
Yeah. The Death Star was not. There was no broadband there.
Clearly.
The missile port thing, I mean.
Yeah, no. Well, the reason, right, if you think about any spaceship, right, and the technology, like how is that technology being powered? Like how are they transferring the information between,
data,
where they're
networks.
trying to go, however many parsecs it is, versus like where they are, like how many galaxies are they jumping to get there? Like It does. It so comes back to like the sharing of communication, transferring information, in all these like little ways. And I'm only thinking of this now. I'm like spitballing in my head. I'm like, it's sci-fi.
That's why we're all
So is it transferring? Is it transferring energy? Is that really what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I
mean,
wow,
what
you're
is-
getting,
what
you're
is-
getting
what
deep.
is-
I mean, when
Well,
you
because
think
think about it, right? Whether you're talking about like at a quantum level, where you're talking about
now
communication,
he's
bytes,
going at a
bits,
quantum
whatever.
level.
Well, no, right? It's all about transferring energy, right? So, I don't know.
I mean, light is energy, and
Yes,
going
right.
through fiber is light waves.
Exactly. And
Okay,
then
so is fiber the key to us finally being able to be like transport ourselves places like on Star Trek?
quantum particle entanglement, because that's the only way. You have to do it in a vacuum.
But then we're gonna be like Quantum Leap, where the guy like I end up in like somebody else's body.
So okay, so if
I don't exist. It's
if
just
no
like-
one understands this concept, right, you can take a particle, right, and they're entangled. So you can manipulate a particle in one part of the universe that's attached to that particle, and it does the same thing at the exact same time, right? It's it's totally encrypted in a sense, right? There's no way that you can
well, at least
corrupt
it's
the
secure,
information.
It's encrypted. It's safe.
It's as safe as any information could ever be, right? And they've actually proven this out already. So that's the new technology. That's where we're going to go in the next century. It's not going to be fiber. It's going to be quantum particle entanglement. And
Everybody at
I
Mountain
mean,
Connect,
it's cool
no,
stuff.
Fiber is not.
Fiber is not the answer.
Fiber is
No,
not
it
the
is the
answer.
answer for our life.
Quantum
Quantum entanglement.
particles is the answer. Beam me up,
Yes.
Scotty.
Because if you had a cold enough environment, right, in a vacuum, then you could potentially move matter like data through that process, because again, those entangled particles are doing the same thing on the other end. So if you, yes, it's possible. I think it's possible.
I might have to have a scotch instead of a beer to figure that one out.
I know,
but
I
I'm
know,
with you.
I
I'm with
know.
you. All right, let's jump to what can sci-fi tell us about the prediction of where we are? We're in 2023 right now. What do we think? What can sci-fi tell us? Like, hey, where are we going to go in the next couple of years? Like, what's going to come true that hasn't come true yet?
Well, I'm going to start with Octavia Butler.
Oh, okay. I'm clearly a big fan.
So anybody who has read Parable of the Sower will know that she predicted a lot of things that have already happened, but the book doesn't actually start until 2024, 2025. And so she's very prescient in that regard. But
She's better
I
than
think,
the Farmer's Almanac.
well,
Don't knock the farmers.
But the interesting thing about that book is it really focuses on how humans can, Earthseed is like the concept, and it's like how do humans start to plant themselves among the stars, right? So how do we build communities and connections now so that we can innovate and get to the technology standards that we need to actually like go out into the universe? So I think that we could be going
Dun, dun,
in that
dun.
direction for sure. But also I think the big takeaway from her book and her works in general is just thinking about the ways we have to focus on and build community connections where we are now. And I think that's a big part of building out fiber broadband. We talk a lot in the grant space about, you know, the community support that you get, and you can't do that without building community relationships. And also, if we're going to prevent the AI from taking over, we need those connections with one another so we can come together to prevent that from happening as the human race.
So you do believe in Terminator.
So my prediction, right? So for anyone who hasn't seen 2001: Space Odyssey,
Odyssey. Wow, you've
Odyssey.
been. Jeez, you only have a beer, people.
almost
Have a
done with
beer.
my beer.
Ah.
There's a scene. So there's a space shuttle, a spaceship, and Hal is the AI that powers it, and sees everything, controls things. Some of the astronauts see issues with Hal, and they want to shut down Hal, and so Hal knows. And then the astronaut is trying to get back in to the space shuttle and says, "Open the pod bay doors, Hal." And then he's like, "I'm sorry, Dave. I can't do that." And basically tries to kill him by and Hal purposely took his helmet away so he couldn't even get out. Point being, if we're not coming together to regulate AI and determine how we're going to handle these really advanced technologies and what kind of parameters we're going to have around them, it's going to kill us all.
No doom and gloom here on Beer and Broadband.
Yeah, I mean, everything you
Congress,
said.
I hope
yeah,
you're listening.
I think they're right. I mean, AI is. I mean, we could talk about going to Mars and going to other places, and I think all those things probably will happen, but it's all going to happen because of AI, machine learning, robotics, and so, yeah, AI is a scary reality that could. Anybody see the new Mission Impossible movie?
Not yet.
Okay, so I won't spill the whole beans, but the AI component in that movie is so real because it's all about power and dominance, and if the wrong people using AI decide to use it for evil, right? Think Death Star.
Well, I was thinking like Oppenheimer right now, so no, okay.
Well,
I was thinking
it's the same thing though, right? Something that can be, I mean, think about, I was in the Navy and being on a nuclear powered vessel, I mean, you could be out there for a century and never really need any more energy. Why don't we power cities with little micro, and there's other reasons I get, there's both sides of the story, but the point is that, there's amazing things out there and AI is one of those, but we have to learn to regulate it, control it, because it could turn into like a Terminator environment. Maybe it's not like physical robots, but it could be controlling banking, economies, governments. Think about if there was an AI who decided based on all the, based on being able to infiltrate in a way that cybersecurity couldn't stop it. And it decided to work autonomously in whatever way it wanted to. And somebody had some kind of fingers controlling that in some way. You could control governments, you could control parts or the whole world in some sense.
Not every AI is R2D2.
That's true.
Because if you consider how many
I mean,
times
C3PO is a pain in the ass. I mean, that goldenrod man, he's
when
But
we
he
think
speaks
about
how many
R2D2, he like plugs into all of the ships.
I
The
know.
Death
That's true.
Star, he
Yeah.
is like controlling things. He's turning things on and off. Like he's gathering the
Stop
data.
the garbage compactor, though.
He stopped the garbage compactor.
That's pretty important. The whole
and really,
whole story would be lost.
all of, like most of the R2 units can do that, right? And so thankfully they're the good guys, but
Because only broadband works for good guys.
Only
I think
broadband
let's
works for
just
the
go
good guys.
Only broadband technology works for good guys. It is never used for evil.
never.
Never.
But so that then, gosh, that brings us to like, how do robots, do AI, do machines have?
Do they feel?
Well, do they have some sort of conscience, right? Like, what are we programming into them on how to evaluate what is good and what is bad? Like, how does R2D2 know that he's doing the right thing by helping to destroy the Death
Well, at the
Star?
end of the day,
Like, he
right?
likes Luke,
Technology is developed and programmed by people.
Yes.
At the end of the day. So, like, I mean, people are at the root of it. So, like, anything can be bad. I think science fiction would tell us that, right? Like, anything can be good and anything can be bad, but like, it's all driven by people. So, yeah, I think technology can be really bad.
It's driven by people now, right? Like humans are the one, well, not even now, but in the past, humans have been the only ones that are like programming and coding, but now like artificial intelligence is also creating code, right?
It's true.
So AI creating its own robots.
Yeah, that's like the fear, right?
Yeah. So, like,
what
I don't
do
know.
we
I
do?
don't know. So, if you, I don't know. So,
That's why we have this podcast.
So, I don't know if you guys do any of you use Midjourney? Do you know what Midjourney is? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Midjourney. Speaking of AI, it is an AI tool that you write out and you can develop images and graphics based on AI.
I think I use that
So-
to make a picture of myself as a grant writer, but as a Jedi. And I put it in a presentation.
That would be awesome. Let's just say that. So
We can post it at the end of the
earlier
podcast.
today, there was a presentation that was done that was generated. All the pictures of the presentation were AI generated, and but it is a tool. But same thing. You write in it, and it is creating concepts and creating imagery purely in AI. So it is writing its own code. So I think that's true. I think that's a risk. But then, I guess let's also think about. These are the sci-fi predictions of what could happen, but then there's also all the good things of sci-fi. Yeah, like, I mean, all the things in healthcare, in the communication with people back on Earth, and all the things that are there that we can aspire to, because like Gene Roddenberry, right? Like, who is obviously genius, But I mean, the things that they've thought about, that like those are all aspirations. And even if you think of, I mean, Elon Musk, I mean, Grant, I think he's a visionary. I think he's batshit crazy. But like at the end of the day, like he talks about his heroes were around sci-fi. It was around those things that allowed him to come up with the new ideas and think about going to Mars and think about SpaceX. So,
well, and if you think about doing that interstellar travel, like space travel, in any depiction, movie or novel, right? There's some sort of technology that monitors their health while they're, traveling through space.
Yeah.
And that's what we're working for with everyone being able to have telehealth. And especially
I want to be bionic.
For older generations, having that remote monitoring, so people can die in their homes and
Okay, but also
AI can help them die.
That went dark quickly.
No, you're right. I mean, it's what's on your watch, right? I
can die
have friends
in
and
your
family
home
that control, like, hey, they have AFib, and they can, they know that their heart's doing something. They can call in a doctor remotely, and if they have internet access, there's AI right now that you can go on, and I think the report I saw the other day said it was almost more accurate than the doctor's assessments in many cases to tell you what's wrong with you, and that's an AI program. So you're right, there is absolute positives that are exceptional, that are really amazing, and there's definitely both sides to it. So yes, there is the evil potential, but I think what they both said, which is we have to come together and decide, where does this go? How do you control it and regulate it so that it can't get out of control? And that's an important topic.
So one of the things I thought about actually just walking around today, which I think we can all admit that telecom some of it's just super boring, right? I think let's be honest, right? Some of it's just super, super boring. And there's a lot of stuff that's just, it's a lot of behind the scenes equipment, all this stuff. But that being said, I think, what if we could leverage sci-fi and leverage the idea and these concepts into something that's more relatable to people? Because I think part of the problem that communities have, even elected officials have, and even frankly people that work in this industry they have, is trying to connect the dots to make it real. But sci-fi can make that real. Like if you connect it and make it something that's more relatable, that they understand, that they see in their everyday lives, that they grew up with, wouldn't that be fun? Like, wouldn't that be a fun thing to connect the dots for people?
I mean, I remember, and I was at a conference, I think in April, and DZS had put together, they make things, and they recommended me to a client. Sorry, DZS. It's the beer. They put together a video that was like clips from the Jetsons. And then also, it was like all the clips of things that we now have today. And clearly, I remembered it, right? Like, it's exactly as you're saying, making it
Good
relatable.
marketing, DZS. Nice job.
Good marketing, DZS. I'm sorry. They make things for the networks. But making it relatable, making it memorable, right? So I think there's probably plenty we could do in terms of, adoption, and community engagement. Like if we're bringing in, especially when we think of pop culture, right? Because sci-fi is pop culture, right?
So Nick, should we make a movie about BEAD and CPF funding and everything that's going to happen, and like draw out
it could be
future?
The Adventures of Barbie.
I'm waiting to see where you're going.
What's the punchline? Yeah, wait a second.
Barbie meets the Jetsons.
Oh, okay.
That's all I got.
That's it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna table that proposal.
But a future, right? Like 5, 6, 7 years down the road, and what the future of America looks like with that technology and AIs being regulated, and how it impacts people's lives, but in a really fun narrative. And I can't.
I can do that.
Any
I
creative
think that
people
can be
to do
fun.
that.
Yeah. I think we have to have not to be political, but maybe people that are not 100 years old to we have to have people probably that are embracing the technology. I think the challenge is with sci-fi and just technology in general, like you have to be open-minded enough and see the potential for it. I think that's the challenge, like people don't, they see it in a certain way, and the reality is what it is today is not what it'll be tomorrow. And just like science fiction teaches us, right? Like, I mean, what was then is different now. So I think that's probably a big change. All right. Well, I know we're almost out of time, and almost out of memory. And so let's kind of end with, and almost out of beer. So we're definitely going to continue the trend of a sci-fi episodes. This is only part 1. Part 2, 3, 4, 5 will be continued, just for the record.
By part 5, are we all going to be in costume?
We're all totally going to be in costume.
Cosplay? Okay.
So, total cosplay. So, but
Bill's already ready. He's already thinking ideas.
Before we go, what is your prediction of the next thing that will become true? What's it going to be? Or any other thing you want to talk about that's sci-fi related, that's connected to broadband, that will be informative for our audience? It's wide open because, I've had a lot of beers.
I don't think I have a prediction necessarily, but I think.
Oh, come on. You were full of opinions earlier. You're full of opinions.
Well, I just wanted, the thing that I think is more important to say is like, yeah, we have to think about making broadband and fiber and technology more accessible for people so they understand what the impact is. But I think in doing that, we also have to rethink, like, what do we value? Like, we currently have the technology to end malnutrition and undernutrition around the world, but that's not the thing we value using that technology for, right? So.
But why? And not that I want to go a tangent, I do, but why is that? That's actually a damn good point. Like, why don't we use the technology we have to do those things?
Well,
I know the answer to this. I know the answer to this, but it's a rhetorical question. But
to not go too far into it.
Let me see if I can find what it is. Hold on.
Kate, I feel like mine.
Dramatic
I
pause.
feel like now
dramatic
going
pause.
after.
Wait, it's this.
Yes,
It's this, right?
It's that. It is that, but it's also, we're not talking to the people who would tell us those things, tell us the things that they would really value it as. I think a lot of times programs are built without actually talking to the people who we say they're going to benefit. Like right now we're building broadband out and there's public comment periods. And one of the questions I've been asking today is like, okay, but how are you making public feedback and public comment opportunities accessible to people in rural areas, low income people who just got out of prison, who don't have access to broadband to know where those opportunities are happening or can access those forms. So I don't think we're really talking to the people who can tell us the things that they value and how they would leverage it and the things that could shift that dramatically, because it's not seen as valuable. They're maybe not seen as valuable as other people in our society. And so, yeah, I do think it comes down to money, but I think the technology does enable us to get really creative about it and figure out how we could reach those people in new and creative ways if we decided to do it.
That's sage wisdom. I will say, though, just to give Bill credit, I do think there are people, though, like him and his company that do talk to the community, that do reach out and do ask the questions directly. I think the challenge is we need more of that. We need more of the true, honest conversations, asking the people, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of their situation, they're people. Yeah. Right? And we live in a country where everybody should be equal and they should have the same rights. So.
And to that point, like, also valuing companies like Farmers Telephone and companies like Bill's company in different ways to actually promote equity and maybe not equalness or equality, I would argue.
So what I'm hearing...
You have a higher Google rating than those people that don't care about the communities.
is that we need to use the technology to clone Bill and Kate to make all of this happen. For sure. Equitably and for the community.
Full disclosure, I don't want to clone. Please don't make that happen.
But not all information. You can give information out. I had this conversation the other day with my sister. She was telling me, don't eat anything with red dye 40, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
And it's like I know that, and then I open the thing and I'm like, there's Doritos, and I'm like, yep, I'm eating it, right? So sometimes even with information, we still choose a different path. But I think it's important that we tell that story, and this is kind of kicking off other ideas in my mind about how do we communicate that message to tell the future story to our communities. Is there a way that we can get with that farmer that person who's maybe, it's the same thing. Like people live in like a multi-tenant building, maybe they don't make a lot of money. They can't fill out a form for ACP because they don't have an internet connection, but that's how they're, there's all these like weird things where we need to figure out how to communicate that message to them, like go to them in a different way, because just sending out like emails and ads and all those things, yeah, you're going to reach some people, but the reality is, how do we tell that story that's intimate, that's authentic? And so from a predictability, I think people are going to get better at telling that story. And I think we're going to use tools like AI to tell that story better. At least that's my vision of how I'm going to look at the next 5 years. How do I use technology to help me tell that narrative and story, to get those individuals to understand the benefits of what they can do, whether it's, I'm thinking about the kid who maybe grew up on a family farm and, they can't afford to go all the way to a college and their parents need them at home. Well, now they can go to school online if they have a fiber connection and still work on the farm and create a smart farm and increase productivity and efficiency and all the things that go into that. So there's a lot of unique things that can happen in the next 5 years, and I think it's exciting. And no matter where it goes, I think we just need to be responsible and collaborate like we've been talking about, and work together and be good neighbors.
Could we do a Vulcan mind meld like across the world like that? Come on, no.
That's what AI is, right?
That's what AI
Well,
is,
and I
yeah.
was going to say I'll just have to like write the next book to do this messaging, but then as Bill just said, AI is going to write it. So maybe I don't need to write it.
Maybe you don't need to write it.
Well, but it might need your help
Thank
along
you,
the
Bill.
way,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you.
Because it's the content that you put into it that you might get something maybe more, but it's your idea that starts it. So even though AI might actually write something down the road, it was still conceptualized by a human in a way in the beginning.
I agree.
At some point.
Well, guys, thank you so much. There's so much more to talk about on the sci-fi beer and broadband, but this is, again, we'll have another session very soon. Thank you for your lovely and creative ideas. Cheers, 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 cheers. And we will see you next time. If you have any predictions, please post in the comments. Cheers.